Hello, this video features a watercolor flowered Easter card that I put together really quickly. The supplies are minimal. You can easily do this card with whatever materials that you had, any flowers, some sequins, and you can also use it for other occasions other than Easter. It has a quote on the front of it, and I'm using fun foam to give it a little dimension to the panel. The inside of the card is very simple. I've done several cards with the same inside, and this is another one of the videos featuring it. Let me go over the materials that this card uses. I have a card base cut 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4, a black mat cut 4 7/8 by 3 1/8, watercolor paper. You can use whatever watercolor paper you have. This is Bristol watercolor paper. And fun foam, which is cut at 4 5/8 by 2 7/8. If you don't have fun foam, you can use foam tape. I'm also using a Marvy Plume 2 rose pink marker, and I'm using Distress Stain, Abandoned Coral, and Twisted Citron. And of course I'm using Versafine Onyx Black. Because I'll be watercoloring, I'm using a watercolor brush and some water. Excuse me. I'm also going to be doing some embossing, so I need my embossing buddy, and I have my clear embossing powder in a tin ready to go. The stamps I'm using today is Stampin' Up! Bloom with Hope, Stampin' Up! Faith in Nature, and Fiskars Laugh With Me quotes. This stamp set has a lot of really good sayings and sentiments in it. I'm also going to be using a clear block and glue dots. This card design also has a few sequins. I store my sequins in a bead container, as you see here. So let me clear these things up and I'll just start right into the card. First, I'm going to work on the front panel. I'm going to be doing embossing, so I need to have my embossing powder close by. I've already put my stamps on my MISTI tool where I need them to be, and now I need to prepare the paper by running my embossing buddy all over it. This will ensure that the embossing powder doesn't stick where I don't want it to stick. And since I'm going to be doing the trick to emboss clear over the Versafine Onyx Black, I have to have my embossing powder ready to go. I'm doing this in my MISTI to ensure that if I don't get a good impression on the first try, that I could stamp again in the same place. So I'm just covering it with the embossing powder, and I'm going to take it and hit it with my heat tool. And now I'm going to put the sentiment to the card, and I'm going to do the same thing with the sentiment as I did with the flowers. And now I'm going to stamp a Happy Easter on the front of the card. I decided not to emboss the Happy Easter because there was already a lot of embossing on the front of the card. And now it's time to start the watercoloring. Now to start the watercoloring. I want to put the abandoned coral over the flowers and the green over the leaves. So I'm putting the abandoned coral on my clear block, and I'm going to take my water and moisten where the flowers are, where I want the color to go. And then just simply drop the abandoned coral in, as you see. I'm going to bring in more concentrated color after I dry my brush a little bit to make the colors pop out a little bit. I have to dry the panel between the abandoned coral and the green to prevent the colors from muddying. And I just clear my block and do the same thing for the Citron that I did for the abandoned coral. If you didn't have distress stains And at this point, you could use distress marker, you could use the distress pads, the basic pads, you could use any kind of watercolor paint that you had will work, even the cheap ones that you would get with this school supplies, that will work also. And now I take the panel to my heat gun and heat it. And now while that finishes drying completely, I'm going to move on to the inside of the card. I'm stamping a quote by Mother Teresa in the Versafine, and then I'm going to take the dollar stamp and stamp that in the corner. Once I'm sure it's dry, I'm going to take the marker and color the scallop circle. Now I'm grabbing my bone folder and I'm going to start assembling the card. I'm taking my ATG gun and I'm taping the watercolor panel down on the black mat, and I'm adding a lot of tape to ensure that this lays flat because it's rather warped from the watercoloring. And I'm taking the fun foam and I'm going to put it on the back. I adhere the fun foam by pulling the paper partially back, laying the panel in place, and then pulling the paper completely off. That way, if I need to move it, I still can just grab it by the paper edge. This fun foam will take the ATG gun, but you have to apply it carefully. And I'm also being very generous with that. Once I get the panel lined up where I want it, on the front of the card and make sure it's straight, I just give it a good press down. And now I'm going to put a little bit of sequin accents on it using the glue dots, as I mentioned. And it's always a challenge with sequins and rhinestones, but here we go. So as I mentioned in an earlier video, my granddaughter showed me how to bring the sequins to the glue dots rather than the opposite way, which is what I was doing. So I'm using my quick stick, which helps you pick up small items. It's a little sticky on the end, and I'm placing each sequin on a glue dot and leaving it on the roll. And then I go and give it a little press to make sure that it's stuck. And I grab my tweezers and I carefully pick up each sequin and put it in place on the card. I learned after sailing one sequin over the top of my head that I have to hold on to the sequin with my thumb as I'm pulling it off of the paper. Live and learn. Now I'm grabbing my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen and I'm going to sparkle up the flowers and the petals. It doesn't show up very well on the camera, but in real life it's really sparkly. I also decide to sparkle up the scallop on the inside also. And that is the finished card. It's a really simple design, but it's really very pretty. I hope you'll try it yourself with whatever flowers that you had. You can make this for any occasion you want it. You don't have to just make it an Easter card. You could change the flowers out for balloons and make it a birthday card, or any inspirational picture that you could think of. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe. I try to put out content pretty frequently. Thanks for watching. Take care.